In this series of lecture, I propose to discuss inclusion of assessee's income. In previous lecture, I was discussing about capital gain and others income of other sources, income from other sources. So in this lecture, I propose to discuss inclusion of others income. Section 60 to 64 of Income Tax Act deals with inclusion of others income. The purpose behind these sections are to deal with a mischief that arises out of assessee's avoidance to pay tax. And you know very well that assessee has various methods to avoid tax, and one of the method is transfer of income. So when an assessee transfers income to his or her relatives, then law deals with that situation, and particularly section 60 to 64 of Income Tax Act deal with those situations in which an assessee is avoiding tax, and how and what method assessee employs in order to avoid tax. That method is either transfer or payment in nature of salary, remuneration, commission or fee. So first of all, section 60 of the act deals with that specific situation in which income arises in favor of a transferee by the transfer made by a transferor. Without any transfer of asset by a transferee in favor of transferor, in that situation, transferor is held liable to pay income tax. Section 61 of the Act deals with revocable transfer. So if a transfer is made by assessee, that is individual, in favor of transferee, and that transfer is a transfer in nature of revocable transfer. So for example, if a transferee is transferring some assets in favor of transferor, and transferor is transferring some income in favor of transferee, and if that transfer of asset is a revocable transfer, then naturally intention is very much clear. There is no proper transfer as such of assets. So it is transferor is liable to pay income tax over the income which arises in favor of transferee, because asset which has been transferred by assessee is revocable in nature. Then we have section 62, which deals with exception to this rule, particularly when a transfer is irrevocable in nature, dealing with three specific situations. The first specific situation is that transfer is made which is in nature of trust in favor of a beneficiary for lifetime, or transfer of asset is made by transferor in favor of beneficiary or transferee for a lifetime. In these two specific situations, since it is irrevocable transfer for lifetime, the law of section 60 and 61 is not applicable. It means that it is beneficiary or the transferee, as the case may be, would be liable to pay income tax. And third condition is that if a transfer of asset is made before 1st of April 1961 and that transfer is irrevocable in nature for more than 6 years, then again rule of section 60 and 61 would not be liable on this specific situation. It means transferee would be liable to pay income tax. So we have these scheme provided under section 60 to 61 and 62. Section 63 defines what is the meaning of revocable transfer and what is the meaning of transfer. Particularly, the meaning of transfer has a very wider meaning. It includes agreement, convent, and other method of trust, these are there. Now, the most important section of this particular concept is section 64, which deals with a specific situation in which assessee is interested in any concern. That interest is substantial interest, and the spouse of that specie is working in that concern. And for that purpose, assessee pays income, any salary, commission, fee in nature of remuneration for the services provided by spouse of that assessee. In that situation, it is assessee who is considered as liable to pay income tax over those income which arises in favor of a spouse. So it's a very unique situation. Income is arising in favor of a spouse, but income tax is something for which still a spouse is liable to pay. There is a slight deviation from earlier law. If you compare with earlier law of income tax in India, these sections are slight deviation. Particularly section 64 is a slight deviation. Why I am saying there is deviation? Because the section 64 uses a term like indivisible and a spouse. In earlier law, it was husband and wife. So this law is a general neutral law because this law presumes that income may arise, or you may say properly, spouse may, the individual may be husband or wife, as the case may be. Because law does not presume right now that only husband can acquire income. It is also a wife who is capable to be interested in a concern. So that's why section 64 is general neutral section which perceives that wife may also be interested in any concern. But earlier law was different in comparison to section 64. So what are the conditions for section 64? The first condition is that concerned assessee, who may be husband or wife as the case may be, has a substantial interest in a concern. Concern means business or profession. And since that husband or wife has some substantial interest in any concern, spouse of that husband or wife, as the case may be, works in that concern. And for that purpose, whatever services which is being provided by spouse, assessee is paying any fee, remuneration, commission for the services provided by spouse. So it is assessee who is liable to pay income tax, even if income is being income arises in favor of that spouse. So this is the spirit of this section. However, the exception which has been provided in the section, which says that if assessee has any technical or professional qualification, and it is because of that technical and professional qualification, income is attributable to the knowledge and experience. In that case, assessee would not be liable to pay income tax. Rather, it is a spouse who would be responsible to pay income tax. Now, what is the meaning of term technical qualification or professional qualification? And the second part of the sentence is knowledge and experience. The question arises whether the spouse should have any technical or professional degree required or not, or simply real knowledge and experience is required. So this particular question was raised in a case of Bhatta Kalyani versus CIT. In Bhatta Kalyani versus CIT, there was a wife involved in the business of hardware and paints, and husband was employed for the purpose of that business. So husband was working in the shop of wife, and husband was getting paid for the services provided by the husband in that particular shop. So income tax officer asked to pay income tax over the salary which is being accrued in favor of husband. However, income tax officer asked to Bhatta Kalyani, Mrs. Bhatta Kalyani, to pay income tax over the income which is being arisen in favor of husband. However, assessee, that is Mrs. Bhatta Kalyani, refused to pay income tax on the ground that the section 64, an exception of section 64, deals with a situation in which if husband has any expertise in that particular activity, in that case it will fall within the exception and assessee is not liable to pay income tax. However, revenue refused to accept this argument. According to revenue, if we read section 64 exception, the important requirement is not simply knowledge and experience in real sense. There must be some technical knowledge or some technical qualification or professional qualification. And what is technical or professional qualification? It is degree or certificate that is provided by specific institutions which regulates that business or that profession. So the point what revenue was making was accepted by Andhra Pradesh High Court. While reading the section 64 exception, Andhra Pradesh High Court came into the conclusion that we can reduce the meaning of term qualification with the spirit of second part of sentence, that is knowledge and experience. So what is important is not that there should be any specific degree or qualification in that sense, but actually there should be expertise, real knowledge or experience is required instead of any degree or certificate. Because if one is going to interpret harmoniously, the two part of sentence is containing the spirit of section. The one part of sentence says there should be requirement of technical or professional qualification. The second part of sentence suggests there should be knowledge and experience. As far as knowledge and experience is concerned, naturally it means real expertise. And technical qualification or professional qualification means there should be any degree or diploma or certificate. So the first part of sentence was circumscribed, was limited with the spirit of second part of sentence through harmonious construction, and Andhra Pradesh High Court came into the conclusion that the real expertise is required, not degree or diploma or certificate. The fallacy behind this interpretation is the court avoided to read the term and between the two parts of sentences. So and is very important because either you can read and or you have to read and as and, because the real method of interpretation of a court is to read what has been used by the court. However, sometimes court may differ, court may apply some different interpretation if court feels so. If court thinks that it will fulfill the justice. So there is one thing to have law, there is another thing to do justice. And to do justice, sometimes court may read and as or. However, in this case, court does not go into that direction. Court simply restricted itself, and through harmonious interpretation, court came into the conclusion that the first part of sentence must be restricted in the spirit of second part of sentence. The second part of sentence deals specifically uses the term knowledge and experience, so that must be taken into account to interpret the word like qualification. However, this particular law was not accepted in another very important case decided by Bombay High Court called J.M. Mokasi versus CIT. Now, the fact of this case is different. In this case, there was a doctor, surgeon and cardiologist, and the doctor employed his wife as accountant cum receptionist. His wife was still a student in Bombay University, first year arts student. So his wife started working in that clinic as a receptionist and accountant. And in fine year 1978 and 79, SSC paid 8,100 rupees as a salary to his wife. Now income tax officer asked to pay income tax to the SSC, that is doctor. Doctor refused to pay on the ground that this particular situation falls within exception instead of the rule in section 64. The real argument of the SSC in this case, especially when it was raised before the special bench to the tribunal, four important arguments which were raised by SSC in this case. The first argument was that the meaning of the term concern should be restricted to business only, not in relation to profession. So medical profession is a different thing. So medical profession will not fall within the meaning of term concern. The second argument which was raised by SSC was that if you look at the word and in the sentence of exception of section 64, it should be read as or, not and. So it should be read as not as a cumulative reading but alternative reading. Either this part of sentence should be satisfied or that part of sentence should be satisfied. The third argument which was raised by the SSC in this case, that substantial interest in concern means it should be a maximum interest. So it is not minimum. So if any SSC who has 100% interest in concern would not fall within the purview of this section. So substantial interest means this is the maximum threshold. And so if anyone who has 100% interest in any concern would not fall within the purview of section 64. And the last argument was that it is not technical qualifications such like degree or diploma is required. Simply expertise or real knowledge and experience is required to fall the case within the purview of exception of section 64. These are the four very innovative arguments which were raised by the SSC in this case. Now, tribunal did not accept these arguments. On the first point, tribunal held that concern includes business as well as profession. On the second point, that what is the meaning of substantial interest in concern is concerned. Substantial interest means it is the minimum threshold, not maximum. If you read the explanation of section 64, that is explanation 2, as far as for a company is concerned, if any shareholder has 20% minimum control over the shares, then it would be considered that person has substantial control, or that person has 20% profit in the company. So if any company, if any person has 20% of interest, then in that case it could be considered as substantial interest. So this particular explanation suggests that the meaning of term such like substantial interest is merely a minimum threshold, not the maximum. So if minimum threshold like 20% falls within the section itself, then 100% won't fall. This argument is not correct. On the third point, tribunal held that since Parliament has specifically used a term like "and" in the exception of section 64, so it can't be read as "or." It should be read as "and" because the intention of Parliament is to read two parts of sentences, not in alternative but in cumulation. And the last argument that it is the real expertise that is required, not degree or diploma. Tribunal refused to accept this argument, and tribunal held that the degree and diploma and certificate is required. The matter was raised before the Bombay High Court, and by Bombay High Court, again these four issues were raised by the SECI, and Bombay High Court went into the detail to understand this concept. First issue was whether the profession will fall within the definition of concern is correct or not. As far as Bombay High Court is concerned, Bombay High Court suggested that the very terminology like business is very wider in nature. Even within the definition of term business, every kind of profession will fall. So business itself is a very wider term. Forget about concern. So concern itself suggests that it will include business profession as well. Concern is not a very limited term. So any person who is engaged in medical profession or legal profession will fall within the purview of concern. On second point, Bombay High Court held that substantial interest in concern. What is the meaning of substantial interest? Substantial interest is the minimum threshold, not maximum. So if anyone who has 20 rupees in a business would fall within this section, and if anyone who has 100 rupees out of 100 interest in that business would not fall, this is not a logical analysis. So substantial interest in concern is the minimum threshold. If anyone who has more than that will naturally fall in that particular category. So in this case, doctor has 100% interest in the concern, would fall. There is no doubt about it. On the third point, whether "and" should be read as "or." Now Bombay High Court was categorically very much clear that the interpretation and the first rule of interpretation is to read "and" as "and." Why "or"? What is the justification? It may be read as "or," but there should be cogent reason to support so. Particularly to ensure justice, we may interpret in such a way. When we say that procedure is a handmaid of justice, it means that to promote justice, sometimes a court is and capable enough to read "and" as "or." However, in this case, to read "and" as "or" would be simply a rewriting of law itself. And the court is not supposed to rewrite the law. Court is supposed to fill the gap. If court finds any gap in law, court may fill that gap. Because the Parliament cannot foresee every futuristic situation, every mischief. So it is the court who ensures justice on ground level. So there is something called formal justice, and there is something called substantive justice. So the real meaning of justice is that not only law provides some principles, but it is the court applies those principles on ground reality. So court may interpret sometimes "and" as "or," but there should be cogent reason to support so. In this case, there was no cogent reason to read "or" "and" as "or." So according to Bombay High Court, the both part of sentence in section 64 exception should be read not in alternative but in cumulation. And particularly on the fourth point, court held that the first part of sentence is the condition precedent to apply second part of sentence. What is condition precedent? Without the fulfillment of first condition itself, the second part of sentence will not be applicable. So what is that condition? The condition is the concerned spouse must have any technical or professional qualification. What is technical and what is professional? Professional means there should be some a special skill or knowledge in favor of professional, like medical profession or a legal profession requires adequate skills to pursue that profession. So to pursue the profession, even if you have a skill, but if you don't have any degree like LLB for legal profession or for the medical profession, you must have degree from the concerned institution to pursue that profession. You can't pursue that. So if any person who does not have the necessary requirement to pursue profession, that is degree, cannot pursue it, legally cannot pursue it. So naturally the first part of sentence is the condition precedent that must be fulfilled in order to move into the second part of sentence. Once the spouse has degree or diploma or certificate that is required to pursue the profession or business, as the case may be, the second part of sentence would be applicable. And what second part of sentence suggests? The concerned spouse has knowledge and experience because of he or she, as the case may be, has technical or professional qualification. So if I have LLB degree, then I may start practicing. And once I start practicing, I have acquired knowledge and experience out of that practice. Since I have acquired knowledge and experience, and it is because of my knowledge and experience I am earning my income, then in that case, naturally I would be liable to pay income tax instead of my seniors who is paying me any salary. If my senior is my spouse, and suppose that my spouse is giving me some remuneration and salary in favor of me, and I have LLB degree, and it is because of LLB degree I am working as an advocate under the supervision of my senior. So I am liable to pay income tax in this situation because I have a qualification, and it is because of qualification I have also experience and knowledge, and I am acquiring my income. So my spouse, or that is senior, won't be liable in that case. That is the law. So in J.M. Mokasi versus CIT, Bombay High Court differed with the opinion of Andhra Pradesh High Court in Bhatta Kalyani versus CIT. And naturally, court held that one of the cardinal principles of interpretation is that you have to read a sentence in such a way that any other part of sentence should not be made redundant. You must make it meaningful. Parliament has used it for some purpose. You cannot rewrite it. You have to interpret it. The interpretation requires the skill to read whatever intended by the legislature itself. You cannot amend it. You cannot rewrite it. So to read the other part of sentence in such a way to make the other part redundant is not a good interpretation. So we have to harmoniously construct, and we have to use a particular read the term and as and in order to read it cumulatively. It is the cumulative reading of both part of sentence which suggests that one of the precondition for the application of exception is that there should be proper technical or professional qualification to pursue that profession or business. and it is because of that qualification, that degree, that certificate, that diploma by the concerned institution. The concerned spouse is acquiring some knowledge and experience, and income is attributable to that knowledge and experience. If these three important conditions are fulfilled, only then exception will be applicable, and it is not assessee who will be liable to pay income tax, rather the spouse of a assessee will be liable to pay income tax. Now this is the concept, and that is very much clear. Now we have two another cases. The Mohani Thapar case we will discuss in next lecture, and also one another case is there. So two other cases are also there, so we will discuss in next lecture. For today, I have discussed all these three nuances, and hopefully it will be helpful for you for upcoming examination. I will try to help you through these recorded lectures. I hope it will be useful for you, though I know that in classes we would have used different methods of teachings, and we would have a different kind of experience. We would have very stimulative discussion in classes, but it is not possible right now. So for today's, this is what I would like. I intended to discuss, and in next lecture again two of other cases I will again discuss. That's all. Thank you very much.